I don't know about you guys, but as much as I love editing photos in Lightroom, I really do not like Adobe, and I dream of the day that I have a photo and video editing workflow that is not tied to Adobe subscriptions. And for video editing, DaVinci Resolve was the easy and clear answer compared to Adobe Premiere. And for years, I've kept my eyes open for a Lightroom competitor that is actually worth switching to. And for years, I held off on Capture One because I wasn't quite ready to leave Lightroom. Now, it looked promising because it was not locked behind a subscription, but I held off just a little too long, and a couple years later, now it is locked behind a subscription, and it's arguably more expensive than Lightroom. I think the main reason I've been hesitant about switching photo editing software is because as long as I've been a photographer, I've been using Lightroom. And willingly giving up Lightroom is kind of like me selling off my favorite camera for no reason. Which leads me to the other day. So I was browsing the internet and I came across a Lightroom competitor called Photomator. Now, I have heard about it before, but I never really looked into it. I heard that Apple recently acquired Photomator and Pixelmator sometime within the past year. Now, I really did not think twice about it, mainly because I think the name's kind of silly, Photomator and Pixelmator. But something about it the other day piqued my curiosity and I decided to give it a shot. And the results were actually really surprising. Now, when I was doing my research, I did find that while it is a monthly or a yearly subscription, you do have the option to buy a full lifetime membership of it for only about $120. And there is a free trial available, so I was like, why not? I'll give it a shot. So I think one of the main reasons I've had such a hard time switching to anything besides Lightroom is because I've spent so many years fine-tuning and perfecting my Lightroom presets. And it would be nearly impossible to replicate my editing style in any other editing software. So I hopped on Photomator, where you can edit up to 3 photos for free, or you can get the 7-day free trial. And for the most part, everything feels very similar and I felt right at home when editing. So I decided to go through the tedious process of replicating my Lightroom preset, and it was actually super easy and I got it pretty dang close. So once I did that, I saved the preset and I went to town editing. And I was truly surprised by just how much I enjoyed using this program. Now, I do want to go over the pros and cons of Photomator because there are some very important things that it is missing that Lightroom has, but there are some other things that it does way better in my opinion. But is that enough to make me switch over entirely from Lightroom? Let's dive in and see. So the first thing that you'll see is that the layout is obviously very, very Apple-like. It's a lot more like the Photos app rather than Lightroom or anything else. And one thing I really like, first of all, here is your folders over here on the side. So I can import a folder of a group of raw files from the day, and it's just right here on the side, and it's easy to find everything. You do not have Lightroom catalogs, which I actually find kind of convenient because you can easily find the photos from each day maybe you were out shooting. So here are my photos from the Outer Banks that I shot. And then here's some photos from Sony Kondo last year that I shot. And then some other various photos as well from other outings I've had. So this is all super convenient. And then up here at the top where you see library, you have all of your files, so you can go in here and look at all of them. Of course, there are probably going to be a lot of photos in here if you shoot a lot of photos. But once you've edited a photo, it's added to this edited tab. So you can go through and just skip right to the photos that you have already edited. And it makes it super quick and easy. To me, this acts kind of like the quick collection in Lightroom because whenever I'm finished editing a photo, I add it to my quick collection and then I move on to the next photo. And on the side here, you also have your flagged, your rejected, and your star ratings. So let's go ahead and just pull up one of my photos right here. And you will see that one thing, unlike Lightroom, which is kind of annoying to have to go do every single time, is, well, I shoot all of my photos in a 4:3 crop. Now, when you import the photos into Photomator, it does not automatically crop them. So you have to go here to the crop and automatically do it each time. And one thing I will say, the auto straighten, let's see, this photo's pretty straight, but it did straighten it just a little bit. I found that the auto straighten actually does a better job than Lightroom does. So let's go over here to the actual adjustments tab, and you'll see here on the side that it has pretty much everything here that Lightroom does in a slightly different order, but it also has other things as well. So you have your black and white that you can turn on, you have your color monochrome, which is kind of a sepia look, which I probably will never use, but it's cool to have. One interesting thing here that you typically see with other, I guess, lower end or cheaper photo editing softwares, it has a fade option, which just kind of gives it that, 2016 Lightroom editing look where it lifts the blacks. But you can just do that with the curves here. So I would rather just do that in there. So I'll probably never use that. But there are a ton of cool options here. So let's go over here to my presets that I've made. I throw that on, and that looks almost exactly like my preset or how I would edit it in Lightroom, which is really, really cool. Now, recreating my Lightroom presets was actually pretty easy because if you go over here to the RGB curves and everything, you'll see each one has coordinates. So in 0, out 20, I was able to just straight up copy those from my Lightroom preset, and they were pretty spot on. I'd say like 95% accurate. And the way that Photomator actually handles, colors and exposure is really, really nice. And part of me feels like I like it a little bit more than Lightroom. I feel like Lightroom might be a little better at fine tuning, but I don't mind this at all. Now, the biggest difference that I was not able to carry over from Lightroom was the selective color here. So you can go over to each of your colors, you have your hue, saturation, and your brightness or luminance like in Lightroom. I found that these did not carry over and match very well, so I had to go through and tweak these and find a look that I was happy with. But it wasn't difficult and it was still fairly easy. Now, right below the selective color is your color balance, which is pretty much the same thing as your color grading in Lightroom. Now, I actually like this a lot more. So you can use this, and it's very similar to how it is in Lightroom. But you can also go down here to the shadows, and then you can adjust just the brightness of your shadows, which I actually like doing this more than using the shadows adjustment up here, because then you can come through and just increase the saturation in your shadows if you want to do that. Something you cannot do in Lightroom unless you create a mask, as far as I'm aware of, but I really, really like this a lot. Now, one thing I really like that Photomator does differently compared to Lightroom is the way you can create masks, but it functions in a way of layers, similar more so to Photoshop compared to Lightroom. So if I go up here and create a new layer, I can do more adjustments there, but it also has select subject, sky, background, brush, a linear and a radial gradient, and a color range. So if you use those things in Lightroom, they are here. Now, I like to use the select sky a lot to make adjustments to my image. One thing I do to most of my photos is I'll select sky and then I'll invert, which I am able to do in here, thankfully, and it does a pretty solid job, but not quite as well as Lightroom, especially if you're working with trees and trees that do not have leaves on them, so you can see the sky through the trees. So you might have to go in here and do some fine tuning. You can see that it did miss some parts of the sky here that are just blended with the inverted background. And some other things that Photomator has as well. It does have a repair tool, so if you shoot a lot of portraits and you do a lot of retouching, you can use this. And it also has a clone stamp feature, which is very similar to how it works in Photoshop. So if you find yourself constantly having to bounce back and forth between Lightroom and Photoshop when you're retouching portraits, you can do it pretty much all just here in Photomator. And you can adjust the softness, aka the feather as they would call it in Lightroom, for the clone stamp, which is very useful as well. And this is also a good time to mention that Photomator also has a Photoshop companion, which I actually have not used. You do have to pay for it. As far as I know, there is not a free trial, but then again, I don't really use Photoshop ever anyways, so I don't feel like I'm probably in the best position to go over the Pixelmator. But Photomator, Pixelmator, you can bounce back and forth between both of these, and it's just as seamless as it would be in Lightroom. So that is basically just a quick overview of everything that I like about Photomator. I'm sure as I continue to use this more, as I've only been using this for a couple days, I'll discover more things that I like, but I'll probably also discover more things that I do not like. So now that I've talked about most of the things that I like about this program, let's talk about some of the things that I do not like. The main thing being the lack of camera profiles. Now, if you're like me and you shoot on Sony quite a lot, and I have the 20 to 70 on here, Sony lenses are good, they're great, but they also rely on a little bit of trickery, especially in Lightroom, because a lot of lenses, like the 20 to 70 here included, they rely on camera profiles to correct distortion, which are automatically applied when you import your photos into Lightroom. Now, there are no camera profiles in this app. And as far as I can tell, I could be completely wrong. I have not found any way to correct distortion inside of Photomator. Maybe you can do that inside of Pixelmator, but Photomator, I don't believe so, at least not yet. Of course, that could change in the future. Now, you can correct vignetting, but I would say the main reason people use camera profiles is to correct distortion. The 20 to 70 is one, and I know the 24 2.8G is another big one where the photos do not look very good unless you have those camera profile corrections turned on. And the next biggest thing, which is certainly a problem considering my favorite lens is the Sony 35 1.8, it has a lot of chromatic aberration whenever you're shooting wide open. And as far as I can tell, there is no way to remove chromatic aberration inside of Photomator. Now, that's far from the end of the world for me. It's not the biggest deal, but that I could definitely see that being a deal breaker for some people. And the third con, which I kind of got a little ahead of myself and mentioned earlier, is that the AI masking needs a little bit of work. Like I mentioned, you will find that it is not entirely accurate all of the time. It does a pretty good job, but it's definitely not as good as Adobe Lightroom's. And that's really all of the cons I've found so far. And some other things that it has, that Lightroom has, that I have not mentioned yet that I forgot to, is that you do have a super resolution, so you can increase the resolution of your photo just like in Lightroom. Also does a pretty good job, and it also has a denoise function as well. I think if you're used to using Lightroom, you're gonna feel right at home using this app, and you'll catch on pretty quickly because it's all so similar to Lightroom. Not to mention, I've found Photomator to be faster when starting up. I found it to be faster at importing photos. It's just overall a much faster workflow compared to Lightroom. So that was just a quick overview. I know it was not the most in-depth. I just wanted to introduce you guys to this program because I found it and I fell in love with it so quickly. I will probably be making more videos about Photomator in the future, just diving in more detail. Now let's go over the elephant in the room that I mentioned earlier. Apple now owns this app, so what is going to happen to it? Now obviously I cannot see the future, but my biggest fear is that one day this app will run its course and end with the same fate as Aperture. Now if you're not familiar with Aperture, Apple actually used to have a Lightroom competitor called Aperture, and they stopped updating it probably about 2015 or 2016, and it faded into obscurity as future Mac OSs no longer supported it. But I was thinking, there must be a reason why Apple bought Photomator and Pixelmator. And hopefully it's not to cannibalize them for Apple's own photo app. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I don't think it's the case considering just how well these apps integrate with Apple Photos. And not to mention, they would be losing a lot of money if they got rid of these memberships and the lifetime fees. So my hope is that Apple continues to update and improve Photomator and add some of these features that I've mentioned throughout the video that I really wish this program had. I think it's already in a great place, but without the ability to apply profile corrections or remove chromatic aberration, two relatively simple things, I'm not sure if I'm fully comfortable yet switching over, despite this app being fully capable of editing 95% of my photos. I just need it to reach that 100% like Lightroom. So what I think I'm going to do is continue to keep my eyes on this app. I'll probably purchase the lifetime membership sometime in the near future, because it's bound to go up in price sooner or later, especially in this economy. So what I think I'm going to do is, in future videos, I will probably be editing some of the photos I take in Photomator. I'm just not going to tell you guys which ones, and I don't think you will be able to notice a difference. So let me know in the comments down below if you've actually used Photomator before, and let me know what you like and what you don't like. Now, we all have different use cases, so there may be things that I like that you don't like and things I don't like that you like. And if you have not used it before, I highly recommend giving it a chance. And if you do, let me know what you think. So thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, like the video and subscribe to help support the channel. And I hope I could inspire you guys to get out and take more photos. Go out and shoot.